Good evening. Welcome to today's Tropics for August 12th, 2021. Please note I'm not a meteorologist, and this video is just a collection of my thoughts and opinions about the storms I'm talking about. And for any decision making, please consult the National Hurricane Center or your local officials. So today I'm looking at Tropical Depression Fred, which is currently in the extreme southern part of the Bahamas right now, and Invest 95L, which is currently in the central Atlantic. So let's take a look at Tropical Depression Fred. So now it is in the it's over back over water now, not over Hispaniola anymore, and it seems it's gone to the north enough so that it's probably not going to make go. It's probably not going to go very much inland or inland really at all into Cuba. It seems it might be able to stay over water. So that means it has a bit better of a likelihood to become stronger, but conditions really aren't in its favor right now. So we'll see if it can become that too much stronger. But I probably wouldn't bet on it at this time. Looking at the water vapor imagery, you can see here's that big upper trough that's over Florida here, and here's that kind of the upper ridge between that and another upper low to the east, and you see there's a lot of westerly flow aloft, and that goes over to where Fred is. So it's getting sheared some right now, and the mid-level center and the low-level centers right now are not aligned. So it's a tilted system, so it's probably going to not strengthen too quickly. It might be able to strengthen, but it'll only be able to do so quickly because the deep convection over it's going to be not as efficient if it's a tilted system rather than if it's an aligned system. So we had two recon missions go in. Here's one at the low levels, and it is finding that the low level center is basically at the edge of the convection due to that shear. It also is finding some decent winds, tropical storm force. So Fred might actually be uh, almost a tropical storm, maybe a very low grade tropical storm now, thanks to that convective activity. Uh, However, again, it's sheared, and we also had a another mission that went in that was at a bit above 700 millibars, uh, and that means it's almost like more mid-level, and it found a center that's a bit further into the convection, so further to the southeast of the low-level center, and then a dropsonde here shows that they are indeed misaligned, because at the low levels here you have southwesterly wind, which implies that you have some sort of low off to the northwest. But when it was dropped, there's some more northeasterly winds, which suggests that there's a low more to the southeast. So that means there is some southeast to northwest tilt going on, and so that will keep any intensification slow. Here too, it has a pressure of 100 or 1,012 millibars, wind of 27 knots. So that kind of implies that the pressure is probably around 9, or it's at 100 or 1,009 millibars, so a bit stronger than expected. The conditions again currently are unfavorable because of the upper trough, which is imparting some westerly shear over it. It might have a short little window to intensify a little bit as the upper trough here kind of weakens and retrogrades, and you have kind of this almost jet streak sort of area emerge to the north or Fred, which allows it to experience some upper divergence and maybe intensify under some more favorable upper level conditions while it's around the Florida Straits, where there's also more water. This is sometime during Saturday afternoon. We'll see if that happens too, because in fact the low center is actually a bit to the southeast of what was expected. It was expected to be a bit further here over here, but it's a bit further east. So that means forecast might have to be adjusted a bit to the east as a result of that. Hopefully, you'll have a better idea tonight. But after this kind of time when it's expected to have a bit more of a favorable upper air conditions. It seems it'll be caught on the west side of the upper anticyclone. That means it'll probably experience some southwesterly shear as it goes over probably some part of the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So the GFS is one of the less favorable model or guidance models when it comes to the shear. So it might be more favorable than this, but what GFS says is going to have a brief window of slightly more favorable conditions where it might be able to spin up a bit more, but then will encounter some shear and maybe remain weak. We'll see if that happens, but it doesn't seem that there will be a very large window for it to become a strong system at this point. Looking at the official NHC cone here, you can see, yeah, it kind of looks weird here because it's a bit further east than I was expected to. But the current location suggests that it's probably not going to actually go over Cuba. So that's a good thing for Fred because it's not going to have to deal with more mountain interaction. But the atmospheric conditions it has probably won't be a huge help. Just because that shear is going to stay around until it doesn't have too much time to intensify, and even when the shear starts to let out or starts to decrease, it's going to have to realign itself, and that takes time. So it's probably not going to become something that's very strong at this point. There are some tropical storm watches for parts of Cuba and southern Florida, so that could happen, especially or some strong winds could happen, especially if it is a tropical storm, as recon might be implying. But probably at this point, the main issue with Fred is going to be it's going to have disorganized convection as a result of its general disorganization. And that means you can have kind of heavy areas of heavy rain to its east, and that's indeed what's expected in the next few days. A lot of southern Florida will have heavy rain. There could be higher amounts in the or some isolated thunderstorms. Of course, it's hard to predict that, but in general, large swath of rain here could cause some flooding, especially in those low-lying areas or just generally flood-prone areas. So stay safe and make sure you're prepared for that, as uh, it will probably start to approach this area into the weekend and towards the early week if you're further up into parts of northern Florida. Now let's take a look at Invest 95L. It seems to be pretty close to development now, actually. The northern side of it has become pretty dominant as it's gotten a decently well-defined low-level circulation, and it has some convection here too, which is kind of putting up against the southern part with the mid-level center here. It's still easterly sheared. You can see that kind of outflow from the east that's kind of pushing on it. And so is some easterly shear, but it does seem to be close to development. And if it can keep convection going and, have a, good diurnal convective maximum tonight, we might see it be able to kind of step over that line and or perhaps become a tropical depression. Looking at the water vapor imagery, you can see some extra stuff here. You can see again, yeah, that tropical easterly jet, which is pushing some easterly shear on it. It's a bit higher than expected, which might hurt it a bit, but it is still expected to back off a little. You can also see some of the drier air to the north and to the east, but it seems that it's in a decent environment right now, and that is expected. It has been expected to be in a relatively moist environment for the main development region in mid-August. So it seems to be doing well for itself now. You can also see it's not really northeast to southwest oriented anymore. It's starting to kind of get more uprighted. And you kind of trace out here if you know where the low-level center is. And it's more north-northeast to south-southwest. So, once it starts to get more north-south oriented, that's when you tend to have the most likelihood of this northern part try to become a tropical cyclone. That's what we seem to be uh, perhaps seeing. The one fly in the ointment, though, is this southern side. This is where the mid-level center is, and it hasn't really died off, so it keeps competing with this dominant northern side. This side is down at 10 degrees north, and so it has less Coriolis force rather than at 15 degrees north. And so usually this area isn't really southern side really isn't as favored. However, it's still generating convection. That mid-level center being here rather than over the low-level center means that it'll probably compete with the northern part and perhaps keep Invest 95L from becoming too much stronger or developing. So perhaps this structural issue is why the guidance isn't really developing Invest 95L. At the same time, you've got some guidance, especially GFS here, which has been consistently just way too weak with the convection, and so has been consistently too weak and playing catch up with Invest 95L. And so it seems as a result of kind of underdoing the convection and some of the structural issues, there still is very meager model support for this to develop. But if you look at the actual conditions around it, it has a decent amount of moisture and the shear is low. So this is definitely something to watch for development, even if the models don't say that it will happen. Again, you don't want to hug the models. That's modelology rather than meteorology. In this case, you would want to look at the conditions, and those do favor development. Hence, why the National Hurricane Center has a 70% chance to develop. It doesn't seem that it'll be able to strengthen too much more in the next couple of days, so it's probably not going to tap into this more northeast or southeasterly flow here. So it's likely that the actual flow it'll feel is more east northeasterly or east southeasterly in nature, and so there might be some changes depending on beta drift, depending on how strong it is. But in general, it looks like it'll be steered that way, perhaps towards the Greater Antilles. But where we actually get something getting going, we'll have a better idea soon, and we'll see if it goes north or south, or goes right over the Greater Antilles. One interesting thing to notice here, actually, is perhaps due to the upper level cyclonic flow to the north. You see the flow actually start to slow down as you get to into the Eastern Caribbean. That's kind of unusual, but these trade winds are weaker than usual in this area, forecasted to. The trade wind divergence that usually kind of rips apart waves or weak tropical cyclones here seems to be weaker than normal. So the Eastern Caribbean is actually more favorable than it usually is. But one thing to notice here too, if you look at that flow, see in the very low levels here, this is if it can't get a mid-level center over it, or it just remains very weak, you have more southeasterly or east southeasterly flow, and that would keep it moving a bit more north. However, if you have a more developed system that also has a nice mid-level center over it, see the flow towards the mid-levels are actually a bit more just out of the east, and so that would and a bit slower too. So that would mean there might be a bit of mid-level shear, probably not something that would uh, cause major disruption. But the main thing here is you'd have a probably slower moving system and one that doesn't quite gain latitude as much if it is able to become a stronger, more stacked storm before it gets to the Caribbean. Again, we'll have to see what happens and kind of iron out the trends within the structure of the storm. So it seems that there's three scenarios. Probably the most likely one is it goes more north of the Greater Antilles, and it'll stay over the ocean. Except the problem is there's a very wavy flow. Again, the GFS is probably the model with the less favorable upper level flow, but it does seem that there will be a few upper troughs in this area, and maybe a tut cell right here. And so, unless Invest 95L really gets going and becomes a stronger cyclone and kind of pushes it out of the way, it'll start getting sheared here, and it probably won't be able to strengthen a whole lot unless it somehow gets over under a lower shear pocket. Another possible scenario is it kind of takes like a Fred-like track and tracks over a lot of these Grenier Antilles islands, and that would keep it weak. You have generally better conditions aloft, but it would just be kept weak by that mountain interaction, and there would be again obviously a lot of uncertainty because of kind of the small track errors snowballing into uh, larger intensity errors. And probably the least likely scenario, but probably something to watch before you actually get uh, the tropical cyclone, if we ever get one out of Invest 95L. If it is somehow able to go south of all the guidance and go over the or go south of the Lesser Antilles or Greater Antilles, that is, it'll be over the Caribbean, and you can see that's south of this tut cell, so it's lifted out. This is usually something you do see during peak season, and there's a lot of easterly flow aloft, so there isn't high shear. And as I said earlier, there also isn't really a whole lot of fast trade wind flow that would rip apart a storm. So if it can kind of sneak under the island, it might be able to develop and start strengthening in the Caribbean, and we could see something of more consequence if that does happen. But it doesn't seem super likely at this point. So uh, wouldn't be something to panic about unless it did happen. Hopefully, though, in the next couple of days, we'll get a better idea of the track and the structure, and generally where Invest 95L could impact down the road, and what it tries to do, and if it can perhaps become something a bit stronger. At this point, can't really know. Uh, Otherwise, the Atlantic is pretty quiet so far right now. If you have any questions, comments about my videos or video, please let me know. And thanks for watching.